Another tough away game awaits us. Arsenal travel down to the banks of the Thames to take on Marco Silva's in-form Fulham side. Emile Smith-Rowe could line up against us. You might say the Gunners are facing Hale End FC 2.0. Emile Smith-Rowe, Alex Iwobi, Bern Leno, and Reece Nelson all play their football for the Cottagers these days. We'll preview the fixture here on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. How are we? Hope you're all good. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. It's a little bit chilly in North London, but it is December. We can't really complain too much. We know what we're going to get. Lived in this country long enough to know that December is generally pretty cold, and to leave the house without a jacket is rather foolish, but it is something that I did this morning to go to the local shop, and instantly, I have to say, I regretted it. Firstly, before we dive into Sunday's game, I just want to let you guys know that the free Patreon memberships that we were giving away for Christmas have all been redeemed. So there's no more left. Massive thank you to everybody that took those up. I hope you enjoy the content that you're going to have coming your way over the rest of the month. I really, really do appreciate all the support, and I thought it was a decent way of giving something back to you guys. If you fancy signing up anyway, you can do so via the link in the description. If you already use the Patreon app, if you're subscribed to another pod on Patreon, you can just search for us on the app, the Chronicles of a Gooner. And of course, integration into your Apple podcast feed and into your Spotify feed is all available and accessible to you guys as well, because I know that's a big thing for a lot of people. I always get a lot of questions about that. In terms of other updates, the man cave. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to jinx it. And a lot of it is weather dependent over the next week, 2 weeks, lead up to Christmas, basically. And you just know that you can't depend on the weather in England. So I don't want to say too much, but what I will say is, fingers crossed, if all goes well, I'm not going to be podcasting from a bedroom for much longer. And man, I can't tell you how desperate I am to get into a new recording space. I can't tell you how desperate I am to get everything set up the way it should be, the way it was before, and get back to producing a much higher quality of content for you guys. And a massive thank you to everyone who stuck with us during what's been a bit of a crap period in terms of sort of just moving around, trying to do things in different rooms, the tech issues that we've experienced as a result of not always having everything set up and ready to go at the right times, and all the rest of it. And any background noise that you may have heard. You know, my kids have been running riot during podcasts over the last few weeks. They've been downstairs and all that, but I can still hear them. So I'd be very surprised if it wasn't coming through at all. But anyway, let's talk Fulham. Fulham away, and every game at the minute really does feel massive, because we've been saying for a while now that a run is necessary to keep us in the running for the Premier League title. We have put ourselves in a position, and I think, you know, we've been quite unlucky, and the fixtures haven't helped, and there's a lot of reasons that you can attribute to why we are where we are, but we're still a fair way behind Liverpool. And although we managed to take a couple of points out of their lead the other night, they dropped points up at St. James's Park. Our set-piece prowess got us through in the game against Manchester United, and we made it 3 wins on the bounce for the first time this season in the league, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. I think we all accept and we all acknowledge that because of the position that we're in and because we are the chasers, there isn't a great deal of margin for error. Now, myself and Mike on yesterday's pod discussed at length about the fact that actually maybe being chasers benefits us. Maybe mentally, that's a position that we're better equipped to deal with. I think when you've been there, done it, got over the line, and then you're being chased, you've probably got that sort of self-belief and sort of self-confidence that allows you to come through the difficult moments when somebody else is hot on your heels. But when you haven't got over the line yet, and I always say that the first one is the most difficult one, when you haven't got over the line yet, it can be quite daunting, actually, you know, knowing that every time you take to the field, there's a side that are definitely going to win, in the case of Manchester City in previous years. And you've got to go out there and do your job. And there's no real margin for error. I'm not saying there's margin for error now, but we're the ones looking up. We know what we need to do. It's clear. We need to go out there and we need to win as many games as we possibly can and hope that that's enough to see us get back into real contention. Because I've noticed a lot of chat post the Man United game, the people saying the title race was never off, people saying that we're right back in it now. I don't subscribe to any of those ideas personally. I don't think it was ever completely off. I said that we were in a temporary state of being out of it and that it was a state that we could correct. It was a state that we could move away from and we could fight ourselves into a position where we are back in contention. So I never closed the door completely, but I don't think when you're 9 points behind, you can be sitting there saying, oh, yeah, we're right in this. I think that's a bit silly. And I think actually this kind of want to keep that narrative alive of we're in the title race, it can actually be a distraction from what actually needs to happen, which is you need to go back to basics. And when I say go back to basics, I don't mean 4-4-2 on the deck, old Sam Allardyce style. I mean, you need to focus on your performances. And if you get your performances right, then the results will follow. And if the results follow and you can string a load of them together, then by default, you end up back in the position that you want to be in or a similar position to the one that you want to be in. And hey, if Liverpool are flawless between now and the end of the season and they go on to win the Premier League title, well, fair play to them. But I don't think that's going to happen. So we've got to be there. We've got to be ready to pounce. We only will be able to do that if we're winning games ourselves. And that's what I meant when I said the focus shouldn't be on trying to justify to everybody out there that we're still in this title race. It should be on getting our performances right. Because if you do that, everything else that we're hoping for is a byproduct of those performances. The Cottagers are fourth in the Premier League form guide. They beat Brighton last night thanks to an Alex Iwobi double and an own goal, and that leaves them sixth in the Premier League table. They're having a really good campaign. Aside from the fact that there's loads of ex-Arsenal players in their ranks, probably with some extra motivation to show their best selves on the day, I expect this to be a really, really difficult fixture. I do. I think that Fulham are a side who have proven themselves to be very capable of upsetting the odds. You think back to last season, they took 4 points off us, damaging our title chances. We started really, really well in the away game. We took the lead and then ultimately capitulated. I still can't put my finger on why, by the way. It was just one of those days. The home game at the start of last season as well was a game they caught us off guard. They played on our insistence on playing out from the back. They played on some of our vulnerabilities down that side on that particular day. And they made us pay. They put themselves in front. We managed to turn the game around on its head. And then we went and conceded an equalizer late on, which made it really, really frustrating. And I remember being really upset with Alexander Zinchenko after that game. In fact, I can remember exactly where I was. I was sitting in a beach bar in Crete because I traveled over for my friend's wedding. And I remember watching it and I remember being really frustrated. I remember recording a video for this very channel where I think I was walking back to the hotel and I just remember it spoiling my evening. So yeah, really, really frustrating. Really, really frustrating. I like this from Ray Beam. He says, hi, Harry. Why are they listing this game as Arsenal Fulham when it's actually Arsenal A versus Arsenal B? Very good. Very good. But yeah, Marco Silva, let's talk a little bit about him because I think he is key to Fulham's success at the minute. I think he's key to the problems that Fulham are going to cause us because I really do regard this guy as one of the more tactically astute managers in the division. I think he's really capable of setting up sides both to frustrate and to create. And I think it's that flexibility that makes him perfectly suited to a club like Fulham and perfectly suited to the clubs that are not quite in the upper echelons, like they don't belong in the top six. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Fulham, but they've also got the resource and the squad to be at least knocking on the door. And I think someone like Marco Silva is perfect for that type of job because, as I say, he isn't one that has this clear, well, he's got a philosophy. He's got a way of wanting to play, but he's not stubborn enough. A bit like Ruben Amorim, a bit like the things I was saying about Ruben Amorim in the lead up to the Man United game. He knows what his preferred style is, but he's humble enough to realize that in certain games against certain opposition, he's got to change it. And it's that balance, I think, that makes him a really, really good coach. I touched on, some of the players that, are coming up against Arsenal in some cases for the first time and will be wanting to prove a point. And I think that, Marco Silva, to kind of further back up the point that I've just been making, is someone who isn't afraid to leave some of those players out for the greater good as he sees it. And Emile Smith-Rowe is a good example of that. I do want to talk about the Emile Smith-Rowe dynamic in just a second, but an example was earlier on in the season, not that long ago, a couple of months ago now, I think it was, where Fulham went to Manchester City, and Emile Smith-Rowe, who had been in really good form and really playing well for the Cottagers, was dropped from the side. And I remember a lot of people sort of from outside of Fulham circles looking at that and going, why would you drop one of your best players? And I actually spoke to a Fulham fan, Jack Collins, from the Fulhamish podcast on TalkSport's Inside Gooners yesterday. Check it out if you haven't done so already. And he made the point that, no, it wasn't because Emile Smith-Rowe had been dropped because he was playing badly. It was because Marco Silva probably felt on the day that Andreas Pereira, who's a much more aggressive presser, who's probably going to give you a little bit more in terms of work rate, was the better option for that day. It's not a criticism of Emile Smith-Rowe, but it's just not his game. And that's a prime example of Marco Silva looking at his squad, understanding where they're at, understanding who they're playing against, understanding the scale of the task, and taking a decision that he believes better equips his side to go and achieve a result. That's a prime example of it. There's a lot of managers that would have gone out and spent 35 odd million quid on Emile Smith-Rowe or whatever it was that they paid for him and feel a pressure to start him in every single game he's available as a result of that fee. Even more so at a club like Fulham, where buying a £35 million player is a bloody big deal. But no, he doesn't feel like that. He believes in his methods. He believes in his sort of ideology. And the biggest compliment I could give Marco Silva is that he's very adaptable, and he's almost a chameleon of football management, right? He can adjust to where he is. He can adapt to the background, and he can put out the right side for the right game. And we've very, very often seen that reap the rewards for him. Just on Emile Smith-Rowe, obviously, look, this is a guy who, as Arsenal fans, for many, many years we adored. And for many, many years, I think a lot of us were desperate to see it work out for him, and it just didn't. And primarily, I think it was due to him not being able to stay fit. I do think that as the team sort of developed and progressed and evolved tactically, he also became less of a good fit. And again, it's not a slight on Emile Smith-Rowe, but, he is a number 10. That's where I like to see Emile Smith-Rowe play. When he done some of his best work from Arsenal, he was coming in off that left-hand side. But does he have the intensity to be your out-and-out left winger? Probably not. Not in a Mikel Arteta team. It's not necessarily what we're looking for. So I think it was a combination of the two. It was a guy whose fitness record was really bad, and it meant that over a long period of time, we weren't able to trust in him. And by the time he seemed to come out the other side of that, he had that surgery. The team had just evolved and developed into something very different, and something that no longer felt like the perfect environment for Emile Smith-Rowe. He wanted to play football, understandable, and he moved on. And he joined another London club that are doing very, very well, as I just mentioned, 6th in the table, and is now a bigger fish in a smaller pond. Like that's the reality of it. And that's not meant disrespectfully to Fulham. That's what Emile Smith-Rowe is now. And he is flourishing in that environment. He needs to play football. He needs to play games. And if he does, there's no reason, guys, why he can't work his way back into England contention. And that'll be something that I think Emile Smith-Rowe will be desperate for. He's been so influential for the under-21s over the years. But, he's not really been able to kick on to that next level because of a lack of game time, whether that be through injuries or whether that be through Mikel Arteta deciding a little bit later on that, he wasn't the one. And he wasn't the right fit. As I mentioned already, it's going to be probably a little bit emotional watching Emile Smith-Rowe line up against the Arsenal. But look, make no mistake about it. If Emile Smith-Rowe is the competitor that we all think he is, if he's the guy with the fire in the belly that we, that a lot of people said he was when he first broke into the Arsenal side, then he will be extra motivated tomorrow. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, he's got an affiliation to the club. And yes, there's an affection that probably runs both ways between us as supporters and him. But he's a professional footballer. And if he's got any drive and if he's got any real determination. He'll be desperate to go out there and show Mikel Arteta, you know what? Yes, I have my injury problems, but you were wrong not to give me more chances when I managed to get myself fit. In that season where he was mostly fit and barely got a sniff, he would have been really, really frustrated. Because in your own mind, when you're injured, you can deal with the fact that you're not playing, right? It's not easy. I'm not saying it is. And if someone said to me I couldn't do my profession because my body wasn't letting me, I think I'd be quite depressed about it, genuinely. And I sympathize. I really, really do. But I think it would have been harder for Emile Smith-Rowe to process the fact that he wasn't playing when he was fit. That's when the frustration, the disappointment, maybe the depression turns into an anger. And that can light a fire underneath you that says, I need to go out there and prove to people. And essentially, Mikel Arteta for a long time overlooked Emile Smith-Rowe, played others ahead of him, gave others opportunities when many felt that Emile Smith-Rowe was probably and should have been the next in line. So there will be that bit of motivation. There will be that desperation to go out there and show Mikel Arteta, you were wrong. Arsenal Football Club, you were wrong to let me go. And that's fine. That's to be expected. That's the competitive nature of the sport. I don't expect Emile Smith-Rowe, if he does start the game, to come out with the handbrake on because he doesn't want to upset the Arsenal fans that supported him for so many years. No, mate, you do you. It's why you made the move. And it so far is working out really well for you. And I'm delighted for you. And there'll be no ill feeling on my part if he turns up and does the business against us, unless he celebrates really over the top. That would annoy me, because I think there should be a level of respect, and the level of respect should come from the fact that we as supporters, it's not about Mikel Arteta, it's not even about the club, it's about us as supporters. We gave him a lot of love, sent him a lot of positive energy during a time when he just wasn't able to help us in any capacity. And so I always feel like those sorts of things, they're a bit of a sort of two fingers up at the fans more than the club, and that's where I get a little bit angry. I got to be honest. Look, as I said, last season, Fulham was a bad fixture for us, and you don't really need any more motivation than that to go out and try and put that right. In Premier League history, there have been 34 meetings between these two sides, and I think it's fair to say our record against them has been very dominant. 23 wins from those 34 meetings. There have been 7 draws, and Sunday's hosts have beaten us on just 4 occasions. History is on our side, but the game is played in the present, not the past. They should, in my opinion, have 4 wins from their last 5 in the league rather than the 3 that they actually have, because in my view, they deserve to win at Spurs. They only managed to draw in the end. They went down to 10 men late on as well. Tom Cairney was sent off. But I think the fact that they didn't leave the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, toilet bowl, whatever you want to call it, with more than just the point, I think it would have really frustrated Marco Silva, because they were certainly good value for it on the day. Another ex-Arsenal player that I'm quite concerned about this weekend, who's been in really, really good form, I mentioned him at the top of the show, is Alex Iwobi. He's both a familiar player and one that we need to watch out for. He's got 5 Premier League goals and 3 assists this season. Same as Kai Havertz in terms of goals, same as Bukayo Saka in terms of goals. I'm also a little bit worried about Anthony Robinson, who's a huge threat for Fulham coming down that left-hand side. Has been for a really, really long time. He's got 4 assists this season. But I do think the way Anthony Robinson approaches this game in the early stages is going to tell us a lot about Fulham's approach generally as a team. And it's going to tell us a lot about whether Marco Silva has come out to try and beat us, or if Marco Silva has come out first and foremost to try and stifle us. There's a lot of games that I look at and I think, oh, tactically that's interesting, or that's interesting, but ultimately it's going to be won by the players on the pitch. I do think this is a game where the dugouts are going to have a big say in how this goes, because as I've said, I think Silva's really tactically flexible, and I think Mikel Arteta's probably got some tactical decisions to make as well with regards to how we approach it. Anthony Robinson is one I've highlighted, though, because I keep talking about his ability to impact going forward. And we know that he loves to come down that left-hand side like a steam train at times. He's really, really effective. But equally, If he does that, he vacates an area of the pitch that Arsenal are very good in. Everybody talks about our right-hand side. And if we've got Timber, Odegaard, and Saka coming down that flank, does Anthony Robinson have the license to go forward in the way that he normally does? And so by default, does us having that really strong right side just clip the wings of Anthony Robinson a little bit and put him in a position where he has to think more defensively, and that hinders him in an attacking sense? And we know that he's a big attacking influence. We know that his influence has been key to so many of Fulham's goals this season, even if it's not assists, there's pre-assists, even if it's not him even touching the ball, just those kind of steam train-like runs that he makes down the left-hand side. They're really, really difficult to deal with, and they do put teams on red alert. So I do think the Anthony Robinson thing, from a Fulham point of view, is going to be really, really interesting. I think we're going to learn quite a bit in the early stages about what Fulham's intentions are. And listen, if their intention is to stifle, I don't have a problem with it. I'm not one of those people that moans too much about style of play when, you know, you're flying and you're in great form and you're one of the top teams in the division. You know, you're going to face low blocks, you're going to face more negative sides, and I think it's on you to find solutions in different ways. The things I get annoyed about are time wasting, goalkeepers holding on to the ball for too long, and all the rest of it. So dark arts, I'm not a massive fan, but I won't throw stones from a glass house, because I think we've become pretty good at doing that stuff as well, which is fine. In terms of the Arsenal team news then, let's get into that. Mikel Arteta is due to speak to the media after we're recording this podcast. But as I've said to you on many occasions over the last 2 seasons, I didn't feel the need to wait for him to speak to the media, because generally he gives us nothing. Right? Zero, zilch, absolutely nothing when it comes to team news. Why? Just because he never does. You know, I expect him to say that we've got one more training session. I expect him to say that there's a few players that we're going to be looking at, etc., etc. The ones that I'm worried about are obviously Big Gabby at the back. And I asked him directly, personally, about Big Gabby after the United game. And I asked him if he'd make Sunday. All he'd say was, "There's a chance," which didn't really give me much, and I wasn't expecting much, but I felt like from the point of journalistic integrity, I had to ask the question, because, you know, he's a really, really important player to this Arsenal team. And so, you know, we're probably in the kind of unknown really around him. Ricardo Calfiori is another one. He missed out the other night, and it meant that we had to play with Kivior and Zinchenko. Let me tell you this. I don't want to go to Fulham with Kivior and Zinchenko playing in the defence. I really don't. If we're struggling still at left back, because I've got a suspicion that Gabriel's going to be okay. I think that Gabriel will be fine. I don't think that Calfiori will be okay. And therefore, we need a solution at left back, right? With Ben White out, with Tomiyasu out, we're limited to using Timber in one position. I also, for what it's worth, think Timber's a much more complete player when he plays down the right-hand side in terms of offering you defensive and offensive contributions. So, yeah, the way I see it, if Calfiori doesn't make it, then I'd like to see Kivior play at left back with Big Gabby just inside of him. That's how I would line up. If they both make it, great, start them both. If they don't, I think Gabriel probably will, and he should play alongside William Saliba and allow Calfiori, I beg your pardon, Kivior to slot in at left fullback. Ant Sheffis in the chat says, what about Kieran Tierney? Why is he forgotten? Well, the other night when Zinchenko had to go off, that would have been the moment, wouldn't it, to bring Kieran Tierney on if he was part of the plans. Like, we've got so many injuries and so many issues that I just think Kieran Tierney is on the bench by default at the moment. I don't think there's any intention to use him. I really don't. I don't think there's any intention to reintegrate him back into the 11. I think having him on the bench as an emergency, having him there so that people remember he's about ahead of a January transfer window, is probably a little bit of a ploy on Arsenal's part to try and drum up some interest in the Scotland international. How fit can he be would be my question. Like, how fit can a guy who's barely kicked the ball, in fact, hasn't kicked the ball all season, how fit can he be? And can he possibly walk into a side like ours right now, where the standard is so high, and do the job? let's not forget that aside from Kieran Tierney's injury problems, he was ultimately let go because he didn't fit the system anymore. And that hasn't changed. Like, we still use our fullbacks in a very specialist way. And Kieran Tierney said it himself that he cannot play that game. He struggled to play that game. He understood why he was left out and eventually moved on. So I don't think there's an expectation on Tierney's part to play, and I don't think there should be an expectation on our part that he is going to play. Hoping that everybody else the other night came through unscathed. And therefore, my starting 11 then, and there's a few players that I think their positions are up for debate, would be this: Raya in goal, no brainer, fantastic goalkeeper. Think he's, really kind of come into his own and just got better and better and better as time's gone on. Saliba and Timber would be my right centre back and right back. As I say, I think that Big Gabby is going to play. So he will come in at left centre back for me. I doubt that Calfiori is going to play. If he does, I want him to play, obviously. But if not, I'll stick Kivior in at left back. I'm not really feeling the Zinchenko thing away from home, especially. Actually, in my midfield, this might come as a surprise to people. I'm not playing Thomas Partey. I'm starting with Jorginho. I think that Jorginho gives us a control that Thomas Partey provides when he's fit and when he's at his best. And he has been at his best for quite a bit of this season, to be fair to him. So I don't want to sort of make this sound or come across like I'm sort of hammering Thomas Partey, because that's definitely not the case. But what I saw of him the other night against Manchester United, he didn't look fit. He doesn't look up to scratch. He doesn't look up to speed. And so maybe we're in a stage now, and we should be looking to share the role between Jorginho and Partey just that little bit more. I was mystified earlier on in the season when we were really struggling as to why Jorginho was used so sparingly. Why were we afraid to put Jorginho in the side? He never lets us down. He's one of those players that has that really unique ability to have no rhythm, to have played no games for ages, and to just slot in and do it really, really well, which is a testament to him. He obviously looks after himself really, really well, but obviously he's a really switched on player sort of up here. And that's what I really love about Jorginho. He gives us a control. He's done really well when he's played. He was really, really good against West Ham. He's been really good every other time we've called upon him this season. And just based on the fact that I didn't feel like Thomas Partey looked fit against Manchester United and struggled at stages of that game, I would bring Jorginho in. It's a meritocracy, right? That's what we want. We want competition. Play Jorginho for an hour, bring Partey on for the last half an hour to build his level back up. Or play Partey for an hour and bring Jorginho on for the last half an hour so that you're sharing the game between them. I think that's really, really important. We talk a lot about rotation. Rotation doesn't always have to be identified in the starting 11. It can be done mid-game, share minutes. It's really, really important. We're in a day and age where in football, you can make 5 changes, 5 substitutions. You can change half of your outfield team. That's massive. So share the minutes between them. That's the way I look at it. And I also think, with Rice sort of looking back to his physical best the other night, that gives me a little bit more confidence in the fact that, Jorginho should come in, because I think with, I think with Rice there and at it, it can protect Jorginho from what we know to be his weaknesses, if you like. Okay, moving on to the rest of the team then. So you've got my back line: Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and Kivior if Calfiori is not available. Obviously, I'm assuming that Gabriel is available in that selection as well. If he's not, we're going to have to play Kivior and Zinchenko because we've got no choice. But, or the other option is to move Timber to left back, to play Partey at right back, and then to put Jorginho in the midfield. That's something that Mikel Arteta might consider as well, just based on previous. So my midfield will be Jorginho, Rice, and Odegaard, assuming the players I want to be fit are fit. That still might lead to Mikel Arteta putting Partey at right back and Timber at left back. You never know. But I just don't fancy Partey having to try and contain Anthony Robinson's runs down the left-hand side. So I think I'd rather have Timber there. Midfield, of Rice, Odegaard, and Jorginho for me personally. Saka on the right, Havertz up front. I think those are the kind of no-brainers. But then the question comes, who plays on the left-hand side? And for me, it's Trossard. I think for a long time, I've sort of been going back and forward in my head about this kind of Trossard and Martinelli debate, which one of them should play, etc., etc. And, you know, there was a game there for Martinelli the other night. Like, I really felt like he could have put United to the sword like the other night, and he just didn't. It just didn't happen for whatever reason. There was a reluctance. There was a cautiousness. Did it come maybe from having players behind him that we didn't fully trust from a defensive standpoint in Zinchenko and Kivior? I don't know. I feel like part of the reason that Martinelli's been getting the nod, even when he's not been as potent in front of goal as we need him to be, is because of his work rate. And defensively, he's very, very good. I just think if you're going to play the more conventional left back, if it's Kivior, for example, on Sunday, and that's based on the team that I've selected, then the need for Martinelli is less. And therefore, you can play Leandro Trossard, who I think I'd still prefer to Martinelli in that final third. If you're talking about, for instance, a chance falling their way or them having to make the right decision in an attacking sense. So, yeah, I think I'd start Leandro Trossard in this one. He's been in good goal scoring form recently, which you can't say necessarily about Gabby Martinelli. He got the goal, obviously, in Lisbon, yes. But, yeah, I think Trossard would just about get the nod for me in this game over the Brazilian. Okay, so that's my team. That's what I think about the game going into it. Lots and lots of your brilliant comments coming through. I'm a little bit pushed for time today, but I promise we'll do some kind of question and answers thing over the next few days where you can get your questions over to me and we'll answer as many of those as we possibly can. All that's left for me to do now is give you a prediction. I'm going to go Fulham 1, Arsenal 3. That's my prediction for Sunday's game. I'll be commentating on the game as well for Arsenal TV, so keep an ear out for me on the highlights, on the match replay, all over the Arsenal website and all the rest of it. And yeah, can't wait to get behind the mic alongside Nigel Winterburn again to cover that one. Thank you all so much for joining me. As always, I'll see you all on the next edition of the pod. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great Friday. Goodbye.